Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's episode of Intuitive Angling. And man, I really appreciate you guys coming by the channel to spend some time with me and watch the video. And today we're going to be talking about fishing bluff banks during the pre-spawn time of the year, which is my favorite time to fish them. And if you guys that watch the channel a lot, you hear me talking a lot about bluff banks and channel banks in the springtime of year for good reason. We're going to get into that in today's video. Going to give you guys some tips and advice on how to approach them and how to fish them. And I think it's going to add up to some good fish for you guys. Also, before we get started, guys, just our daily housekeeping tips you guys enjoy hearing every morning. Just wanted to invite everybody to please swing by and check out the Tackle Warehouse Spring Fishing Sale going on. I'll have my link in the description if you guys would like to use that link to get you some good tackle. And also, we've got the President's Day sale still going on with my Solarbat Series RB2 and RB3 Series sunglasses. You can get them at 25% off, and any purchase over $100, you get a grab bag full of sunglasses. So I'll put that link in the description there as well. Really appreciate that. Okay, a lot of you channel regulars that watch all my deals, you hear me talking a lot over the last month about fishing bluffs and fishing channel swing banks. And the reason that I talk about this a lot is not only these are good structures, bluff banks are good structures all year long, but during the early spring and late winter and early spring, these are prime locations for big fish because bass will use bluff banks and channel banks as sort of migration and staging routes prior to spawning. These are the type of areas they like to set up on for a month or two before the spawn actually begins. And I'm saying there's half the bass population that do that, but man, it is just a great way to catch a giant bass during the pre-spawn time of the year. And I think there's a couple different reasons I think they use this water. One is they have a close access to deep water. They have the ability to use the bottom or suspend off of these banks at the same time. And it offers a great food source. Crawdads live in these bluff cracks. You know, you got gizzard, threadfin shad, different type of, bait fish. It's a good feeding opportunity and it's a good habitat opportunity. So when you're determining how you want to fish bluff banks and, techniques you want to use, like everything else we talk about in the videos, it has to do with water clarity and your water temperature, because all bluff banks are not the same. You've got a lot of different variations in bluff banks. You've got some bluff banks that are vertical rock and they just drop straight off. And then you have some bluff banks that look like a vertical drop, but there's not much water depth on them. The channel may be farther away from the bank. Some bluff banks, the channel hits that bank right up against it and everything in between. So based upon how the bluff is positioned on the lake, you're going to have different type of water depths, close to the actual bluff bank itself. So again, all bluff banks aren't created equal. My favorite bluff bank, it's like from my determination as far as the most productive bluff banks, it would be if your boat is 10 foot off the bank, you're in about probably 10 to 15 foot of water if you're 10 feet off the bank. I have not done that great on those vertical walls where you're right up against the bluff and it drops straight into 20 foot. It just seems like that's not a good habitat for the fish. And if you're in an area that, say, you're 10 foot off the bank and the water's only 3 or 4 or 5 foot deep, not that great either. So like I said, that's sort of the rule I go by, is 10 foot off the bank, 10 to 15 feet of water. That's a nice slope to the bank. So other thing, determinations, that's probably the number one as far as the proximity to, having that type of drop off real close to the bank. The other is the rock composition of the bluff, because bluffs are any type of a vertical wall structure, but they don't have to be a sheer wall. They can be broken rock. They can be a mix of like sheer stuff with broken rock. There can be rock transitions along it. And you're going to find out the best bluffs, what I have seen, is you have that irregular features on the bluff. You may have a section that's got just a vertical wall, then you got some, maybe some rock slides on it, or you got, the rock busted up. Say the bluffs of part of the bluff has fell down. You got different type of big rock on it. Those are going to be the best areas in correlation with where the bluff is positioned at. Now, during the pre-spawn time of the year, you're going to find that your best bluffs are in your major creek arms. In the winter time of the year, I like to fish the main lake bluffs, not so much during the pre-spawn. When that water temperature starts to hit about 50 degrees, anywhere between say 47 to 57 degrees, those bluff banks that are positioned within the major creek arms are going to be a lot more productive. And also the bluff banks that are like associated with a channel swing is going to be really good. Now, what I mean by a channel swing is you got the old creek channel is going to be coming through different positions within a creek, and there's going to be places where that creek channel comes in closer to the bluff. Now, usually what happens is there's a turn in the river there, and there's a turn in the bluff, and anytime that there's a turn, a lot of times is usually when you have some rock transitions, which are high percentage areas. Okay, so that is sort of what you want to look for with that. Now, as far as technique and how you approach the bluff, it all has to do with water clarity. Most of the time, you know, if I'm fishing water visibility that has, say, less than 2 foot deep, less than 2 foot of visibility, bluffs are not that good. Bluffs, you've got to have a little bit of water clarity, in my opinion, for them to be really good. If you have less than 2 foot of water visibility, it seems like the chunk rock is a little bit better and the bluffs aren't quite as good. But if you have over 2 foot of visibility, and specifically over 3 foot of visibility, this is when those bluffs become pretty productive, because as the water clarity gets cleaner, the fish have more options to use on a bluff. They can use the bluff bank anywhere between, say, 5 to 30 foot of water. They can be in 5 foot of water close to the bluff. They can be in 30 foot of water on the bottom. They can be suspended out off the bluff. So traditionally, bluff fishing is better on a clear water reservoir where you have water visibilities of over about 3.5 or 4 feet. Okay, so obviously every lake is going to be different, how that's set up. You don't have to have it specifically just like that. So you sort of have to adapt your technique to the water visibility and how the bluffs are laid in your specific lake. Now, some of my favorite techniques for fishing a bluff, you know, again, is when that water temperature's in the upper 40s to mid 50s. And, you know, depending upon the water clarity, a lot of times will depend on what my approach is. Probably my number one bluff fishing bait during the pre-spawn is a jerk bait. And I like to just get on those bluffs, parallel those bluffs, try to target sort of that 5 to 20 foot zone, depending upon the water visibility. If it's cleaner, I'll move out. You know, if it's a little bit dirtier, you know, I'll stay a little bit tighter to the bank. Second to a jerk bait, you know, you can't beat the crawdad crankbait. And the crawdad crankbait is going to work really good if you have a little bit more stain to the water. So if your water visibility is sort of in that, you know, 2.5 to 3.5 foot zone, some type of a crawdad crankbait like a rock crawler, wigglewort, you know, your traditional pre-spawn lures fished parallel to that rock bank or the bluff bank can be really good. Excuse me. Another thing about the, you'll find out about the crankbait, guys, the crankbait works a little bit better on those bluffs that do have the broken rock on it and a little bit more mixed rock or rock transitions. You're going to find out that crankbait works a little bit better. And probably those two lures account, out of all the bluff techniques that I'm going to talk about here, the jerkbait and the crankbait, I probably use at least 50% of the time, maybe more. The other 50% of the time, it's going to be mixed up with a couple different options. Next one is going to be some type of jig. You know, pitching and flipping, full-size jig like my Blaukat throwback jig, just throwing it to the bluffs, working it down in 5 to 20 foot of water. Great way to catch them, especially when the water temperature's in the low 50s. I usually go with some type of brown or brown and orange jig with a green pumpkin trailer and just methodically pick my way down the bank there. Now, if you've got water temperatures in the mid 50s, sort of that 57 to 57, this is a real good time to slow roll a spinnerbait. Take like a 3/4 ounce spinnerbait, cast it at a 45-degree angle to the bluff bank, and sort of just work it close to the bottom. Slow roll it, just fish it just off the bottom. That's a really good way to catch some big ones. That's probably the best way to catch a big fish on a bluff, is a slow rolling the spinnerbait under the right conditions. The spinnerbait is going to be a lot better under those cloudy, windy, warm spring days. Going to be really, really good. And one thing about it is, like, if you've got like one of those days where it's cloudy and rainy and windy, and you've got water temperatures in the mid 50s, and you've got a nice bluff bank that has some really good broken rock on it, man, that's a prime recipe to catch a big fish on. Some other things you can use on there is an Alabama rig can work pretty good. Again, paralleling it, you know, just throwing a little swim bait can work good. Possibly a chatterbait. All those things can come into play. But the main thing with a bluff is like, you got to fish slow and methodically. It's like, here's another thing that will help you with that is like, if you pull up on a bluff and you catch a fish, there's a good chance that there's a concentration of fish on that bluff. But if you pull up on a bluff bank and you fish maybe, I don't know, 300 or 400 yards of the bluff bank that looks really good, and you're not catching any fish, there's a good indication you probably need to move to a different bluff. Because when you're fishing bluff banks, you're talking about, concentrations of fish that use particular stretches, but you have to be slow and methodical with that, simply because a lot of the cover along a bluff is uniform, and bass can't specifically target around certain areas unless it's like a little rock transition or rock slide. But overall, they're going to use whatever type of cover is along that bluff, and that's why you have to be slow and methodical and make your casts close together and don't get in a big hurry with it. So man, they're just really good. They're really, really good bass structures, and it's like once you start fishing bluffs and you get comfortable with them, you'll see the size of fish they produce. Because in the pre-spawn time of the year, I think that is probably one of the if not the number one, but one of the number one structures to catch really big bass on, like bass over 7 pounds. If I look back, like specifically here in the Ozarks, or even some of the places I fished like in the Southeast, so many of those giant bass that I've caught over the last 40 years have come on those bluff type banks. They're just really good areas, and those big fish really like them. Another thing about bluff banks, guys, is they're really good on a mixed species lake. If you have a lake that has a mix of largemouth spotted bass and smallmouth bass, there'll even be more bass using it. Not to say that just straight largemouth lake won't work, but normally if you have a lake that has nothing except largemouth in it, bluffs aren't going to be quite as productive as those mixed species lakes are. So anyway, guys, give them a try. They're going to be really good. Like I said, I love fishing bluffs up until the water temperature starts to get about 60 degrees, and then it starts tapering off a little bit. But, for the month of February, March, and early April, they're some of the best places to fish on any lake. So hope it helps out. We'll see you guys later.